Well, hello again, and welcome to another one of our devotionals. So I am sitting outside our old sanctuary hall, our old sanctuary entrance. This used to be the way people would come to worship here at First Presbyterian Church, and I'm sitting here because it kind of came to my mind as I was looking at this particular story to do a devotional on it, because it talks about going in through an entrance of Jericho and coming out of that entrance. And so it just made me think of the way in which people are kind of entering the town. So anyway, the other thing about this particular devotional is in many ways this is a part 2 devotional. It is part 2 of a devotional I did a while back called Cry Out. And the reason I'm doing part 2 is for 2 reasons. One is because for whatever reason, this particular or that particular devotional really seemed to resonate with a lot of people. And I think that's because many of us are feeling that need or struggling with so many things, that this idea to cry out and this permission to cry out is something that we need. And we need to know that when we do that, Jesus is there to hear us. But the other reason I felt like I needed to do a part 2 was because for this particular devotional, I got to tell you, I had more emails and text messages and telephone calls of people who were worried about me because of what I said on that video. And I hope that people didn't misunderstand that that video was one to say that, gosh, you know, I, even as a pastor, have this need to at times cry out, because we all need help, and we all need the rescue of Jesus to come our way. So anyway, I hope that people weren't too worried about me, but anyway, I wanted to do this part 2, and this particular story came to mind as I was considering this. It's a story that's told in other Gospels, but it's told in Mark, and I like the way Mark tells it because he actually names the person that Jesus helps. So let us listen to this reading that comes to us from Mark chapter 10, beginning at verse 46. They, that is Jesus and his disciples, came to Jericho. As he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Now many sternly ordered Bartimaeus to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." And he came, and he called the blind man, and he came to Jesus, and Jesus said, "Take heart, get up." And they said to the blind man, "Take heart, it is Jesus who is calling you." So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "My teacher, let me see again." Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." And immediately he regained his sight and followed Jesus on his way. So, you know, I looked at that story, and you know, there's a lot to that story. One, there is this faith of this man who is blind, and he has faith that Jesus, when he hears this Jesus, his faith is that Jesus can do something about that. It's also a great story because it shows how Jesus has a willingness to meet the need of anyone who cries out to him for help. But you know, rather than talking about Bartimaeus and Jesus, I wanted to talk about the crowd. Because there's something about the crowd, and probably the disciples themselves, who simply want Bartimaeus to be quiet, to stop crying out. Why is that? Why is it that they so needed Jesus to not listen to this man? Why is it that they so needed this man to not cry out? Was Jesus too busy? Well, I got to tell you that as a pastor, that is the worst thing that we can hear. If someone says, "Well, I didn't come to you because I thought you were too busy." But you know, the other thing about that is it could have been that they just saw Bartimaeus as unimportant. Well, again, clearly this shows us that no one is unimportant to Jesus. So why are we so uncomfortable when people cry out for help? Why is it that we feel as if we can't cry out for help? And why is it that we feel we have to silence other people? You know, I was thinking about this. Persons who are mentally ill, you know, they often go untreated because of the stigma of being labeled as mentally unstable. I know that sometimes marriages fall apart because they're afraid that if they somehow admit that things are not as wonderful as they once were, or that they are struggling, then somehow everything's going to mess up. And so rather than getting help, they simply stay quiet. I think of the students that often fail because they are afraid to admit that they need help, to go to a professor and say, I don't get it. I think of parents who sometimes abandon a proper care of their child because they're afraid to admit, you know what, as a parent, I'm not sure I always know what to do. I think of business people and pastors who burn out because they're afraid to admit, I need help. So yes, crying out is important. No matter who you are, no matter what you're going through, crying out is important. We all need to cry out now and then. And we as a crowd, when we hear others crying out, we need to be willing and supportive of that person who is in need. Because you know what the bottom line is, as with the story I told of Peter sinking as he tried to walk on water, and as with Bartimaeus, when we cry out, Jesus will respond to the need that we have. So thank you for listening. Thank you for the support you are giving me. Thank you for the concern that you all had. But let us continue to find ways to be ready to listen to those who are in need. Thanks.